Welcome back to Washington Watch. Joseph Backholm sitting in for Tony today. If you've been a regular viewer of Washington Watch, you probably heard Tony cover the issue of COVID vaccines that are being mandated from employers, from school districts, colleges and universities, and even some restaurants and fitness centers and music venues in certain parts of the country as a condition for their services. And Tony's written about this in our Washington updates as well, and he said this on the show many times. What he said is, I'm not against the vaccine. What I'm against is people not being able to choose for themselves whether they need it based on their own health. A government mandate is absolutely the wrong way to go about this. So, what are our rights when it comes to the COVID vaccine mandates that are popping up throughout the country? Well, you are in luck. Joining me now to talk about these questions is Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Matt, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Well, let's start with the vaccine requirements for federal employees. We talked about that in the last segment. Are these legal or not?
They're not. In fact, the emergency use authorization law is very clear and is also the FDA statements, including the FDA fact sheet that goes along with the authorization of these particular injections, COVID injections regarding Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. And it says this explicitly, that any individual has the, quote, option to accept or refuse, close quote, the product. You have the option to accept or refuse. The Department of Justice, in its memo on that issue, on the very first page, acknowledged that's what the federal law said. And they repeated it many times throughout their memo. But then inexplicably, they say that the option to accept or refuse means that we have the requirement to tell you you have the option to accept or refuse. But after that, we can force these shots. It's absolutely absurd. The federal emergency use authorization law authorizes certain medications, either those that are already in existence or those to be created, for emergency use when there's not sufficient data. They are called experimental and investigational in the language of the FDA. And that's why you can't force these particular products, including all of these drugs. But they did anyway, and they said that the VA is going to have to take them, then federal employees. We pushed back, and we're still pushing back. We're working with a lot of VA employees, and now the VA has kind of backtracked a little bit, and they're giving the employees an option to check a box to opt out because they realize that this is a violation of the federal law.
Now, vaccine mandates are not unprecedented in American history. Smallpox vaccines were once required, and the Supreme Court actually said that was constitutional. Is this a different situation than the smallpox vaccine?
Well, when we look back, that was 105 years ago. That was before the First Amendment was ever incorporated into the individual states. And it was before the whole jurisprudence of the First Amendment that developed. So that's really antiquated law. And in fact, there's other federal law, there's state laws that really provide protection. No one can be forced to take this particular shot. Look, we did this before with the swine flu. We stopped that failed experiment after 53 cumulative deaths. Right now, we're having an average over the last 7 months of 57 deaths every single day from these COVID shots. We're having more deaths in one day from the shots alone that are recorded by the CDC than all the cumulative deaths from the swine flu, which we ultimately stopped. And if you remember, not too long ago, we forced the soldiers to take the anthrax vaccine. Well, you know, many soldiers are still suffering from that today. And that's why it's very critical that this remain an individual choice. People can make a decision to take this shot, but they also have their absolute right to refuse this shot. And many are refusing. So these mandates by the federal government, by states, by employers, and by schools violate a lot of federal laws, many state laws. And we are working with hundreds and hundreds of people across the country at all of these levels to make sure they have the freedom to choose what to inject in their body.
Another way that the governments are trying to compel people to get the vaccine is to make life so complicated if you don't have the vaccine through a vaccine passport. We saw this week Mayor de Blasio in New York do that. Is that approach legal for governments?
No, it's not. And in fact, many states have already banned vaccine passports. Florida led the lead in that situation. But look, you cannot check somebody's medical status at the door as a criteria to fly, as a criteria to patronize a restaurant or a grocery store. That's a violation of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, along with other state laws as well. So there's a lot of reasons, in addition to the emergency use authorization law, that you can't force these. We were going to file suit today against a very large university in Illinois on behalf of students. They had denied all of their religious exemptions. But at the last minute, just last night, they relented. But they relented only after these students got an attorney. Now, tomorrow, they're telling other students who don't have an attorney that they'll be expelled. They're bullying people, and they know they don't have a legal leg to stand on. So we may end up representing some of these expelled students next week. But the point is, there is no basis legally to enforce these shots. There's no basis to require the showing of some kind of vaccination status, whether by paper or electronic means, as a criteria to work, to shop, to dine, or to travel.
I suspect that we're going to hear quite a bit about this in the courts. It's encouraging to hear that development out of that Illinois university, because they were willing to stand up for themselves as students and get counsel. Are there other cases that you're aware of affecting either the vaccine mandates or vaccine passports?
Yes, there's a couple of cases that's been filed. We have been very successful at getting religious exemptions for all of the people that we represent, and we're representing them all over the country. And people that need help, they can go to lc.org and then click on the legal help tab, lc.org legal help tab, and there's a sample religious exemption letter that they can use, and we can walk them through that. So we're getting a lot of success here, but we have been on the verge of filing twice, just literally hours away, until the defendant in those cases, one in Louisiana, one in Illinois, and in other places, back down. But we have lawsuits ready to go to make sure that nobody is forced against their will. And now we're starting to see this in the military. We're getting pleas from people in the military who are being told that the mandate's coming, and if they don't abide by it, they'll be court-martialed and dishonorably discharged. Look, the healthcare workers ran to the front line. They put their lives on the line for the last 18 months. So have our soldiers run to the front line to defend our freedom. We should not treat them this way, to tell them what they have to inject in their body, or they're going to be fired, or they're going to be dishonorably discharged. That is reprehensible, and we're going to defend them.
Matt Staver, Liberty Counsel, we're thankful that there are people like you there to defend them when they need it. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Good to be with you.